All right, if you're gearing up for the ACCA Corporate and Business Law exam, there's a concept you've absolutely got to get your head around. It's called the separate legal entity. Honestly, it's the bedrock of modern business, and it's all thanks to this powerful protective shield we call the corporate veil. So let's dive right in. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about why starting a business can be so risky. Then, we'll jump into the story of a guy named Mr. Salomon. His legal fight literally changed everything. After that, we'll break down exactly what the corporate veil is, look at the few times it can actually be broken, and then, to really make it stick, we'll wrap up by comparing a company to a sole trader. So let's kick things off with the one thing every entrepreneur has to face: risk. And I'm not just talking about the risk of your brilliant idea not taking off. I mean the very real, kind of scary danger of personal liability. What happens when your business debts start knocking on your personal door? Just think about this for a second. Imagine you've poured everything you have, your life savings, all your energy into a new business, and it doesn't work out. The business owes thousands to suppliers. Now, what if those suppliers could come after not just what the business owns, but everything you own, your house, your car, your personal savings? That is the exact nightmare scenario that incorporating a business was designed to prevent. And this right here shows you the two completely different worlds we're talking about. If you're a sole trader, there's just no line in the sand between your business debt and your personal debt. It's all one big pot, and everything you own is on the table. But if you're a company owner, there's this legal wall that separates the two. If the business goes under, creditors can only touch the company's assets. Your personal stuff? It's safe. And that protection is the #1 reason people incorporate. So you might be wondering, where did this incredible idea even come from? It wasn't always this way, that's for sure. To really get it, we need to hop in a time machine and go back to the 19th century. We're going to look at a landmark legal battle that involved a boot manufacturer and a guy named Mr. Salomon. His story literally changed the game forever. Okay, so here's the lowdown. Mr. Salomon, he had this really successful leather business. Smart guy, he decides to incorporate. He creates a brand new company, Salomon & Co. Limited, and then sells his old business to this new company. He was the main shareholder, the main director, the whole shebang. But then, the business fell on hard times and couldn't pay its bills. Well, the creditors were not happy. They went after him personally, basically arguing that the company was just a fake, a front for Mr. Salomon himself, and that he should have to pay up. And this leads us to the huge question the court had to answer. Who was actually on the hook for the debt? Was it Mr. Salomon, the man, or was it his company? Seriously, the entire future of corporate law was hanging on this one decision. And the court's final decision, well, it wasn't just about whether Mr. Salomon had to pay his bills. It ended up creating a revolutionary legal principle, one that shapes every single business you see today. The highest court, the House of Lords, handed down this incredibly powerful judgment. And this quote from Lord Macnaghten really says it all. The ruling was crystal clear. The moment a company is legally formed, it becomes a totally new, separate person in the eyes of the law. Even if it's the same business, run by the same people, legally speaking, it is a completely different thing. This idea has a name, and it's a super important one for your exam: separate legal personality. What does that mean? It means the company itself, not the owners, can own property, sign contracts, get into debt, and even be sued. The company has its own legal rights and responsibilities, almost like a real person. And this idea of legal separation, that's what we're talking about when we say the corporate veil. The best way to picture it is like an invisible but legally rock-solid shield standing between the company and its owners. This is the veil that protects a shareholder's personal bank account if the company hits a rough patch. Now, this all sounds great, right? But it does bring up a pretty important question. If this shield is so powerful, couldn't someone use it to do shady things? Well, the law thought of that. And that's why there are some very specific situations where the courts are allowed to peek behind the curtain and ignore the veil. So that leads us to the million-dollar question for your exam and in the real world. Is this shield unbreakable? Can you just hide behind the corporate veil no matter what? And the answer is a big, fat no. In some pretty exceptional cases, the courts have the power to lift or pierce the corporate veil. When that happens, that whole protection of a separate legal personality, it gets pushed aside. And suddenly, the owners or directors can be held personally responsible for the company's debts. So when would they actually do this? Well, the courts will usually step in if the company is basically being used as a tool to commit fraud or to wiggle out of a legal responsibility someone already has, or if the whole company is just a sham or a facade set up to trick people. The point is, the veil is there to help legitimate business. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card for bad behavior. Oh, and it's also important to remember that some specific laws can also make directors personally liable for things like wrongful trading. Okay, let's bring this all home with a super important comparison. For your exam, you absolutely have to know the difference between a limited company and a sole trader, inside and out. And look, all the major differences really boil down to one single thing, that legal identity we talked about. A company is a separate legal person. A sole trader? Not so much. They're one and the same as the owner. And that one fact has a massive domino effect. It leads to the biggest difference of all, liability. For a company owner, it's limited. For a sole trader, it's unlimited. Your personal assets are at risk. And that changes everything. How you make contracts, who legally owns the company's stuff, everything. So what's the big takeaway here? It's simple. Forming a company creates that legal shield, the corporate veil, and that is probably the single biggest reason to incorporate. But here's what you really need to remember. It's not enough to know that the shield works. You have to understand exactly when it works, and, just as importantly, when it can be taken away from you. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? The corporate veil. Is it a vital shield that helps people take risks and start new businesses? Or is it a convenient loophole that lets irresponsible people walk away from their messes? You know, like a lot of things in law, the truth is probably somewhere in that tricky balance between the two. Thanks so much for joining me.